as I was doing my normal, what the hell am I going to talk about tonight? It happens every time. I've been teaching for close to maybe over 12 years, and that question always comes up. And, so I sit down. I used to really envy my Buddhist teachers because, you know, they would give a prepared talk. You know, they'd sit down and they'd go through all these wonderful Buddhist texts and all these wonderful things. And they'd write it all out, and then they'd, you know, kind of maybe even rehearse it in front of, you know, their spouse or somebody, and whatever. But this is not what this is about. I'm not putting that down. I really loved the Dharma talks that I experienced. But this is very, you know, it's alive. And so, like we were talking when we were waiting for people to come, it's like stepping out into space. You know, you don't have that sense of everything is prepared and written down and ordered, and, you know, there's kind of this general kind of sense maybe that starts to come in. And sometimes it doesn't until I sit down, and there's just like, oh God, all right. Something starts to speak, right? Something happens. So this afternoon I was sitting down and thought, well, you know, I'll jot a few things down and see what comes up. And right in front of me was this beautiful little Christmas card. And it said, may peace be with you. You know, it's sort of a thing that we say around Christmas, you know, may there be peace upon the earth, and may you know peace, and, you know, different ways of this blessing of peace. But in most cases, at least that's how I've looked at these cards, it's just sort of like a, you know, it didn't really go in very deeply. And, you know, we'll say, may you know peace. But in most cases, if we really ask ourselves quite deeply, we don't believe in peace really very much, right? If we really look at that quite clearly and deeply. We'll say, may there be peace on the earth. But especially if you watch the news or see what's going on in the planet, it's very challenging to really think that prayer has a lot of power, right? Because you go, yeah, right. Good luck. There's more wars every moment, right? So we either just say it as a trite saying, there isn't very much, you know, reality or truth behind it, or we say it with maybe even like a cynicism. That's why I often would not say that, may there be peace upon the earth, because I thought, you know, I don't know how that's possible. I really don't understand how that's possible. So it can be, you know, just a saying. Though in our deepest sense of truth, in our deepest sense of knowing, we know that that is actually our natural state. Somewhere we know that this place of deep peace is a reality. But in our mind and our conditioning and our collective conditioning, it's very, very difficult to really see that that is our natural state. You know, our life sort of reflects anything but that, at least on the news. And so I started to really look at that and what is this peace? You know, in the Hindu teachings, it is, you know, Shanti, Shanti. It's a very important teaching, and often it will begin a group and it will end a group, you know, and you give this blessing of peace. But what appears to be the outer prayer or blessing for this peace on earth and peace in each heart, it doesn't seem as if There's really very much truth to that. So to look for it in the outer, I think really is quite futile, actually. And to even make these wonderful little kind of blessings and prayers without a strong understanding of what peace actually is, it doesn't really have very much power. You know, it's sort of a nice little saying that we say for each other. But when you begin to see that within you, the silent ground, the root, the actuality of your own nature, it's peace itself. That is peace, right? There's no wanting, there's no movement, there's no dreaming, there's no desire. It's all completely at peace. Have you discovered this within yourself? Mm-hmm. Right. So, you know, that saying that you see on the back of cars, you know, the bumper stickers, and they'll say, peace begins with me, right? And you go, yeah, it's kind of a cool saying. But that's the actuality. And so to look for someone within the community to be different so you can be at peace, or to look at our politicians to be different so there can be peace, or look at other countries and they need to get their act together so there can be peace. It's all kind of a waste of wanting and a desire that is an empty desire, right? Because if this is at peace, this has found that deep inner sense of stillness, no matter what's happening on the planet, then that blessing or that prayer has a profound power. Because you're now abiding from the truth of the origin of peace. And, you know, there's stories that are written of those that have been, say, like in the concentration camps. And probably those conditions were maybe some of the worst that has ever been on the planet. And there'll be stories, not very many of course, but there'll be stories of those that have come out of that situation and that they recognize their inner peace within the hell realm of the concentration camps. Or once in a while you'll hear about, you know, like a great Native American leader, and he or she, you know, were a part of and watching everything that they knew and loved and held dear just destroyed. All their loved ones, you know, annihilated. And yet there was something that they were coming from, and they could stand up in the face of that, and they could be whole and true and clear and not be drugged down by the apparent suffering. They were standing in their peace, the deep root, the deep knowing of themselves, at one with the earth and all beings and all species. That's the deep peace. It's the at one. It's the origin of the one. Most of you, I know it's not cool in Crestone to watch the news, but in some ways, you know, you're probably in tune with some of the chaos that's happening on the planet, right? In some way it's leaking in, even here, right? And you can see, in all probabilities, because there's this tremendous acceleration of light, of the life force itself. You know, and it's bringing everything to the surface, right? Everything now is becoming conscious, it's becoming known. And you can see that within yourself, perhaps, right? Deep-seated patterns that you've projected and blamed others, and patterns that, you simply have not seen. Patterns of victimhood or of deep poverty or, just different things that you just blamed on your circumstances, or you blamed on your parents, or you blame on Crestone, or, whatever it is, that you can project that out. And then you find that you wake up one morning and all that maybe you were projecting out, blaming others, you find that it isn't like it's someone's fault. It's just this deep misunderstanding that has been held within the body-mind. It's just this deep confusion that has no actual fundamental reality. And so it's not only bringing up the different things that are happening on the planet. I mean, this is nothing new, this war. This planet has been at war maybe from the beginning, I don't know. But we now know about it, right? It's conscious. And the same thing is happening individually. These patterns that we were able to compensate or project on others or, try to rationalize in some way, we begin to see that they live within this body-mind. They're here. Maybe it takes you 5 or 6 marriages and, 10 jobs and whatever. And then you start to figure out what was the one constancy. Moi. Right? Maybe there's something to look at there. So this great brightening that's happening on the planet, it's bringing forth what is apparent, a greater chaos. I hear people say, oh my God, it's all just going to hell. And I go, well, have you read any history? There's just more of us. And it is crazy, there's no doubt. It's a greater and greater insanity. So this stability, this rootedness, this constancy, the attention of the person fused deeply with this deep peace. And it isn't something that you cultivate. You don't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to be real peaceful here. It's your nature. It's like what you are. And so from that, then as the increased, and it appears, who knows what's going to happen, but it appears that there's going to be a greater, right? Whether it's the earth trying to, balance herself out, or whether it's greater, inequality with gender and race and income. Who knows? Who knows? There's all sorts of views of what is going to happen. But we do know at this point that there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty and chaos. And so how is it that you really want to be with that? And it's very easy to sort of get pulled into, the wavelets of appearance. But if you notice, that doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve those around you. Right? There's like a lack of being really anchored into right here. The sense of ease, peace, stability. And so you find that for a long time, perhaps some of us 30, 40 years, that you were trying to do this for yourself. You were trying to wake up, and you were trying to, come into this deep recognition. Or many of us, 20, 30 years, just said, to hell with it, I don't need that. And, kind of pushed that away. But in some way, we were all kind of wanting and moving towards something stable and true and peace, full of peace. But somewhere along the line you begin to see that it's not just for this person. In fact, it never really was. That this deep peace, if it wakes up here, it not only helps then stabilize and to add to and to actualize the peace that is our shared ground. But at the same time, it begins to then hold that for those that temporarily cannot. That the fear is becoming greater and greater, and the instability is becoming greater and greater, and the rage is becoming greater and greater, right? So you see that it isn't just for this one individual to get the goodies, at the end of the race, whatever it is we perceive. But you begin to see that it is for all beings. It's to help stabilize it until those are able to find that for themselves. Many of our indigenous brothers and sisters, that's one of their main jobs, is they believe that they're stabilizing the whole balance of the earth. Especially the very ancient indigenous people believe that. There's also those that are maybe in the Himalayas, the great yogis, and they perceive that they're doing that as well. That they remaining and abiding in this deep peace as they really are, then is the transmission and in a way the holding for all beings. For what I have recognized, all beings now can recognize. And it has nothing to do with Buddha being special or Jesus, getting it, and us poor slobs, we can't get it. They were just saying what is true here, because we're all one, and we have the shared root and the shared nature, then it has to be true for everyone else. What I have recognized, what I have seen, is true for all beings. That's what he was pointing to. So this kind of luxurious approach that many of us have taken towards this recognition of our own nature, it sort of becomes a little bit more real. Do you hear what I'm saying? Because it's the most revolutionary act that you can do as a human being, is to come into your own nature right now. It doesn't have anything to do with deservability. It has nothing to do with, you're kind of lined up for that. I mean, it has nothing to do with any of that. It's just coming back home, right here in this moment. And it's so simple that in most cases it's overlooked or denied. It has to be more complex than that. I mean, there's libraries written about it, right? Surely it's more complex than that. And then this coming back, coming home. And then, living the life fully from that, as it is. For some there'll be kind of an ascetic life, and for others it'll be, a very celebratory life, and for others it will be, very ordered and structured, and for others it will be crazy wisdom. It just doesn't matter. It's totally immaterial. But when that deep sense of peace, of rootedness, of that life essence, here I am, when it's lived from that, all of this creativity and this celebration and this exploration, it's just a part of it. It's peace dancing, right? Peace celebrating. Peace having a good time. Who says peace can have a good time? Let peace begin with me. That's really what it's pointing to. It's not looking at, someone else and saying, they're disrupting my peace. If they were doing this and this, then I could be peaceful. Now it's just another dream. It's just another mind idea. It's just another them and us. But we're the good guys and they're the bad guys, right? It's just another game of duality. It has no inherent truth at all. Now that doesn't mean that we don't, try to speak up and we don't stand up for what feels true and right. And perhaps put this body, not ourselves, but put this body in harmful, maybe difficult positions, maybe even die for it. It's a very active peace. It's a very participatory peace. Right? It's engaged. It's awake in its creation. But it draws from the well that does not run dry. It's infinite. All these beautiful words that we put to our deepest nature, they're true. Infinite. Unconditional. Right? Without beginning, without end. Immaculate. Untouched by anything that happens upon its body. Totally untouched. How could it ever be harmed? A beautiful Tibetan word is called the stainless. It's never, ever, ever, ever affected by what dream is dreamed upon its body. Never. And so by coming back to that, and it sounds very abstract and kind of airy-fairy, but actually it's so intimate. It's so intimate. It's more intimate than your breath. It's more intimate than your most profound lover on the planet. It's the deepest companion. That's why it doesn't really matter at a certain point, what the body does. It doesn't really matter in a certain kind of way. If you've found the love of your life, that's nice, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if you have, a perfect community and the group of friends that only you would design, because they would be perfect and they would adore you. They would never get on your nerves. Right? It doesn't matter. That used to kind of make me mad. I'd hear people say, it doesn't matter. Well, yeah. But it's the truth, as I have found it. It doesn't matter. Because that sense of abiding, that sense of being, that sense of at home, that sense of well-being, no matter what, permeates everything. So you can be with a lot of wonderful people, great, let's dance. And you can be by yourself, toddling around in your kitchen, great, right? Whole, complete. That's when you can have a real love affair. But the love affair is with whatever's happening in the moment, right? If it's a person, let's be in love, right? If it's not a person, let's abide in this love. It's love without an object. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? It's love without an object. Because in this deep sense of ground and this deep sense of peace, Love just simply arises and pours forth, right? Just arises and pours forth. It isn't because that's a nice spiritual idealism, it's how it actually energetically functions. There's a teacher that I've been really liking to listen to, and because there's a lot of wonderful awake teachers around. But I like him so well because he's very intuitive, and he just speaks of how it works energetically. Do you get what I'm trying to say? It isn't a nice spiritual idealism or a concept, it's how it functions. You just get into how it actually is. Especially in the Advaita and the non-dual, there's been a real strong emphasis on very precise language and a way of pointing out the impossible to point out. And that's wonderful. We need very precise language. I think it's a very beautiful thing because it's, especially poetry, it sort of lines up the focus, the attention. Right? It's very beautiful. But because we're such a mental society, we can get really lost into that. But if you just start to tune into how it is energetically, the subtle energies, how it actually moves, how it actually creates itself, how it actually expresses itself, it's very direct that way. So this deep, unfathomable well of peace and well-being, it just naturally moves, and it's like a fountain that pours forth, and it creates itself. And it creates itself in the myriad of things. That's why many of the Eastern teachings point to the enlightenment of the 10,000 things. That's what they're talking about. It's not separate. It's natural. It's spontaneous. So you don't have to deserve this love. You don't have to be a good person or a spiritual person. It has no relevance to that. It is. And the only thing that separates us from that is some concepts or ideals or ignorance. No one likes to be called ignorant. But, it's ignorance. You really don't know. You're looking through the past. You're looking through these conditionings that was ancestral or karmic or God knows what, where it all comes from. So this time upon the planet is actually asking all of us in our own unique and perfect way is to come back home and really know our deepest nature and bring our attention that's usually out there trying to figure it out and control it or not control it or whatever our conditioning is, and just let all that be just for a few moments, and then just bring the attention back, drop in, and let the attention and the natural ground of your nature that we all share fuse as this. And it will happen to each one in its most perfect and unique way. But if you continue to bring your attention out and trying to control and get more information and project and push away and everything that the mind does, that's the karmic wheel. Right? Do you live in front of your eyes or do you live behind your eyes? It's a very interesting pointer. It's a very interesting Are you living inside of your head in this little tiny cage called me? Or have you opened your attention and your awareness as it actually is? That includes everything. You are everything that you can see and experience. It's that simple. The contracted me, living in the contents of the mind, the open inclusion, and then the earth, the body, the mountains, the sun, the sky are all within you. It's this simple movement of attention. And then there's a moment that that movement dissolves. And then it's just this open being. It carries you itself. The Buddhists call it the stream entering. You're carried by life. Life comes to you. Life is experienced within you. And so then blame and projection and shame and you are interrupting my peace. You just can't play it out anymore. You just can't keep it up no more. So I'd like to hear from you reports. Perhaps you are finding a deeper and deeper recognition of this piece. And so how would you describe it? I'm interested in that. Not as a lecturing, but as a sharing. How is it that you have discovered this inner peace, this inner knowing? How is it in your life that you have found, rather than blaming the other, whatever form the other is, how is it that you have found, if you actually take that chaos and that ignorance that's happening on the earth, meaning, have you invited the force in that's being cut down? Do you hear what I'm trying to say? Because it's not separate. You can't separate yourself out. What I'm hearing, I've been doing sort of personal sessions this week, and I just keep hearing this theme over and over and over. And one is a deep recognition of this piece. I'm seeing and hearing this in a way I've never heard it before. And the other I'm hearing is the more you open to, I'm not separate from the suffering that's happening on the planet and those that are causing, quote, the suffering on the planet. I'm not separate from that. How could I be? It doesn't mean you condone it or you support it, but you're not separate from it. And the experience of that, because we are in the human heart, we are in the human body, is a much greater experiencing of that suffering. And I don't mean that I am this person that's experiencing the suffering on the planet. But you find that you can't really separate yourself from that. It's suffering or experiencing pain from a different perspective. This is true. But the more you open, the more you actually feel what's happening upon the planet. Someone was telling me, I was giving my little rap, like, oh my God, I'm glad to be back to Crestone. It's so quiet here. I really love it here. There's no traffic. I was just going on and on and on. And someone was saying, yeah, people that live here think that we can escape what's happening on the planet. Not true. There's nowhere you can go. This may be a quieter and more nourishing place for this deep peace. That's how I experience it. But I can't separate myself from, how could I, from what's happening on the planet. It's impossible. I had a friend, and then I want to hear what you have to say. And he was a long-time meditator, long time. And, I'd sit with, some of the really great, especially Burmese masters. And I don't remember where it was. I think maybe it was Australia. And he was doing another 30-day or, 60-day or 90-day, whatever, the meditation warriors, I used to be one of those. My life never allowed me to do, though, the 30 days and the 60 days and the 90 days. I did as many as I possibly could. So he's sitting and he's sitting and he's sitting, and he's heard these beautiful Dharma talks and, the poetry written by all of the great Eastern masters or whatever. And all of a sudden, he began to hear the forests. And he began to hear the suffering of the forest and the pain of the forest. And again, I don't quite remember, I think it was in Australia where they were massively cutting down forest, just football fields of forest. And it was shocking because, he'd rather hang out with, this peaceful Buddhahood. Don't interrupt my peace. But it did. Something came in. Because what he was meditating for actually happened. Instead of just being a good meditator, he became awake. He became interconnected. And so he got up from his cushion. I'm not saying you should get up from your cushion. He got up from his cushion and he began to actively participate in helping save the forest that was being wantonly cut down. So it's certainly not an escape or a negation. And again, many of us, especially my generation, we thought that this was that too. We could escape this insanity. It was like an escape clause. Sorry. It actually gets you more intimately here. You can't really escape it. But you can come from stillness and continuum and constancy and clarity and a place of well-being, and then enter into whatever you're drawn to from that. You can do that. And that's the greatest gift that you can give to the earth and whatever's happening upon her. She's fine. She's fine. She'll shake this insanity off like the natives say, like a dog with the fleas. She's fine. So, what's your experience?